I'm Dr. Susan Eirich, and welcome to this conservation conversation. These conversations are designed to contemplate our collective journey together and how best we can find and then maintain our individual paths. The ultimate goal is action arising from a shift in perception that all life is sacred, and creating a community of practice that grows and supports each other through our actions. We're delighted you're here.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. So actually, I've been at 3 conferences. I think I spoke briefly about one of them. And the overall, I'll share bits from all of them, but the overall sense I had, as one of the speakers said at one of the conferences, is what a time to be alive, where we are in our human journey. That fundamentally, our problems seem to be problems of consciousness, and our consciousness is slowly beginning to awaken around the world. I'll talk a little bit more about consciousness itself based on some of the information we got. But the biggest impression I have from having been to the retreat that was specifically about trying to hear from something other than humans about what can we do about the current situation. And then going to the Global Earth Repair Conference, where there are about 600 people, including a lot of indigenous peoples from around the world. It was a genuine attempt to combine all of our human wisdoms. There were also cutting-edge, hardcore scientists and ecologists, and people who are interested in spirituality. And global earth repair because we need it. And just tonight, I got an email about someone telling me about a conference called Defend the Sacred. It's a conference for global change makers that's taking place in Portugal. And I think there'll be several hundred people there. And the retreat that I just went to before. So it feels like there's a bubbling up of people aware of what's needed, doing their best to find ways to participate in it. And it's very exciting. It's kind of make or break now, which is one of the reasons it's exciting. It's kind of make or break, which is one of the reasons why I say it's what a time to be alive, where we can really make an incredible difference. And several people were talking about, feels like we're about ready to make a leap forward. Like 2,500 years ago or so in the axial age, we made a massive leap forward with the idea that all life is valuable and needs to be treated with compassion, which was a new idea at that time. And it seems like we're having a new idea now about how interconnected we all are and what that means about how we live our lives. So that's probably the most exciting overall feeling. Whether we make it or not is another matter, but we are trying. People all over the world are feeling the urge to pull together and make networks and global networks of people trying to find answers. Do we have any? Kind of. If we start understanding how much we are truly interconnected in not a casual way, but a really understand it profoundly way, and it that's a major shift. How do we operationalize that? How do we make that come down to reality and action? That's the tricky part. There was a story online recently about a teacher who, she was some kind of elementary school teacher, who decided to wear the same dress every single day for 100 days. She wanted to show her students that, first of all, what you wear is not so important, and how unnecessary it is for us to wear something different every day, to constantly buy new fashions, and what an impact it makes on the earth. The students loved it, and people began picking up that idea all around the country. So we go from our human journey, spirituality, the idea that where our consciousness is awakening, down to what can any one of us do? All that woman needed to do was have a little bit of courage and imagination. Didn't cost money, didn't cost organization, didn't cost anything other than thinking of how she could contribute. So that's one tiny example of how change is taking place. There's another beautiful article recently about you can't eat money, you need soil, and trying to reverse the whole idea of money versus real value, and how recent the whole idea of money is, and how crazed we've gotten about it. And all it is actually something we've made up. But we haven't made up the soil. These awarenesses are just coming so fast, and there's so many books. I could give you a list of 15 books just over the last month that have come out with all these different perspectives of what we can do, what's happening. More recently, most of you are aware of books like The Soul of the Octopus or The Hidden Life of Trees. That's been another huge awareness. But there's also all these books coming out about life being sacred. Some ideas, because I just recently got back, I've not digested them all. So I'm going to share with you some of the ideas. And if any of them are particularly interesting to you, as I digest them over the next few weeks, you can write to me, you can ask me to talk about more about them. They vary from how to heal your dog with tuning forks, to letting animals pick their own natural medication through flower essences, to rewilding huge swaths of land. And these were all these different ways of trying to move ahead, trying to grasp what's happening. There's a very interesting concept. There's a guy called Louis Herman who spoke at one of the conferences, and his book is Future Primal. And he was talking about how our problems are fundamentally, as I said, problems of consciousness, and that we're slowly beginning to awaken. The idea that consciousness is intrinsic to matter, and consciousness in our brain is connected to the consciousness of the universe, and that's arising all the time because it's innate to matter. But for the first time, we've had the human capacity for self-reflection and looking at it. And his perception was that it makes us uneasy. We don't quite know how to handle it yet in our evolutionary journey. We're still making that leap, exploring it. Unfortunately, we're exploring it at a time when we've got the technology and the amount of population that consequences of not exploring it quickly are fairly dire. But it's such an interesting idea. And a whole new story is emerging, and all of us are part of that new story. We're working on it, each of us in our own way. There's some wonderful insights about, generally speaking, a guy who used to be considered terribly radical, Derek Jensen, would write about how we need to start from scratch. All of the systems we're operating from have to be relooked at. That has now become, seems to me, at least I hear it more and more, and I hear it more gently, but more and more, that we have to rethink everything. Our relationship to nature, our relationship to the soil, our relationship to money, the institutions. Some very practical things were, one idea, a brilliant guy who spoke called Charles Eisenstein. He talks about the craziness of money. He talks about what a beautiful earth it could be, and in our hearts we know it could be if we could work towards it. But he was talking about a simple example of a system change, that there were something like 600,000 homeless people in the country and 13 million vacant homes. Because of how we're thinking about zoning, we simply don't use the homes properly. I don't have the right statistics in front of me right now, but then someone can correct me, but I'm going to make them up as an example now, that there are, say, 6 million abandoned animals and an equal number of people who would like to have pets. That Charles Eisenstein looks at population as a red herring. We could talk about population growth, and it's certainly good to limit it, but he said, if we lived the way that people in Pakistan village do, we could have 18 billion people on the earth at this rate. But if we live the way we do in the West, in the United States, the earth can only hold 2 billion. So we keep talking about population, but really what we need to be talking about is lifestyle, which means a lot of us having to, quote, give up. My point of view is we're not giving up, we're exchanging things we don't really need for a rich, happy life. But it's a really interesting way of looking at it. Charles Eisenstein's idea also is that the reason that we keep trying to fill ourselves with the consumer culture and buying things is because of the original idea that we've somehow become separated, not just from nature, but from a natural community, that we're naturally tribal. And that the result of that separation, which happened, I don't know, some 1,000 years ago, is why we're in the mess we're in, because we need the nutrition, the sustenance of small communities, and that each of us should be living with the land we're on, whatever it is, and have a profound relationship with our local land. Come up with the idea of being guardians of the land. There was a scientist called John Liu at the Global Earth Repair Conference, and he was half Chinese, and he has taken, you can look him up, he's taken a major area of the Yellow River in China, like huge, and restored it from just empty soil to a rich ecosystem. So his work is on large-scale ecosystem restoration. Lewis Herman was talking about a forest that left alone could regenerate itself. This is a particular forest, but could regenerate itself within 9 years, begin the regeneration process. There's another person who spoke called Dar Jamel, an excellent reporter who wrote The End of Ice. And his understanding of things is that things are really dire, much more dire than we thought, that we have only perhaps 3 or 4 years to turn things around because of the feedback loop as things begin to melt. They melt faster and faster and faster, and that people aren't really realizing how dire it is, and that a lot of people are feeling it's too late. To which Lewis Herman said, it's always too late. We're already living on an impoverished earth. We're living on a 10% earth, 10% of what it used to be. But that doesn't make any difference. The time is still now to take action and change things. And I don't know if I mentioned it to you last time, but there was a really interesting research where archaeologists found the exact place in Montana where the asteroid hit the Earth. And all these things were jumbled up together, animals and plants and fish, the tops of trees. You could see how the massive flood had come into that particular place. And it was just that layer where the asteroid hit it. And in that particular article, it said almost 99% of life on Earth was wiped out. Now, if that's true, look what we have. Look how it rebounded. Look at the richness of what we have now. For us, we want to preserve what we have now, and for excellent reason. But the doomsday about how life is going to go disappear is extremely unlikely and almost a bit of arrogant, because life is so incredibly resilient. I don't know if any of you saw the article recently about a turtle that was found in someone's attic that had been lost for 30 years. And it lived in the attic for 30 years until the family refound it when they were cleaning out their father's things who had just disappeared. It's 30 years in an attic, a turtle. That was very exciting to me. So the Global Earth Repair Conference was people talking about relating to the land. How do you grow things differently? How do you clear the land of the hurt that was there? How do you nurture the land that you might have? How can you bring damaged people, and by damage I might mean something like people who are wounded in some way, mentally or physically, into nature to heal? How incredibly resonant the human body is to nature, and that's why it heals. We're not resonant to things, we're resonant to nature. And one of our problems is we're surrounded by things that we don't resonate with and thus don't help us heal. The culture we live in where things are more valuable than life. What happens when we value life more than things? At the Animal Energy Conference, there was amazing research going on how animals can heal themselves and how they have always healed themselves. That it's not just a chimps knowing how to go and find something that they can eat to get rid of their worms. That when this woman, Caroline Ingraham, we will be having her on a podcast, and I might be having her come to visit us to look at all of our animals here. Very well researched, says that animals, of course, they have to know how to heal themselves. They have to sense what it is they need to eat and how to heal themselves, and how they're actually wanting something. The body makes them want something or have it taste good when they need it, and when they don't need it anymore, they stop. You can look up her website. She has stuff on there about how she helped some bears in zoos, about how she helped an elephant baby who had terrible wounds and septic system, his whole body was septic, and how often they died from that, and she healed that elephant. And it was because she offered him really high quality essences of various herbs or clays or flowers that had the energy of the particular botanical that she was using, and how you could see the bears, you could see the elephants wanting this and sucking it in and really hungry for it, and how when they're finished, they weren't attracted to it anymore, that they instinctively knew. And again, the whole idea of helping the animals heal themselves, that they know what's best if you offer it to them. That was particularly in captive situations, but she gave lots of examples of how it happens in the wild. There was another interesting talk about the nature of sound and how basically we are all sound and vibration, and therefore how effective sound healing is. And there was a woman there, and that particular name is Swaro Sound Healing. Again, we'll give you all those references. And she showed how she used that with animals, both to help heal horses, cats, dogs, and humans. And John Reed, who's a brilliant, brilliant acoustic researcher and healed himself, talked about the nature of sound and how it works, and how you can actually see the impact of sound on, he designed a machine called a cymoscope, and you can actually see the patterns that sound make on this membrane. And if it's healthy sound, it makes beautiful patterns, and you're actually seeing the physics of sound. And he actually tested different kinds of music on human blood and the patterns that would arise on the surface of human blood. So you could see how you could begin to see how sound healing could actually work. It could be, if it's discordant sound, the patterns aren't beautiful or harmonious. That research is not published. He just discovered that, I don't know, a few weeks ago. I was visiting with him and he showed it to me. So the idea of how sound can help organize and structure and reorganize things that are unstructured or disorganized or diseased or disintegrated. And then this woman with the tuning forks, showing how she used them on human bodies. That's just a tiny bit of all the stuff that has gone on. I think I will stop for now and have comments or questions or input from you that you've seen. I guess there's one other thing that was so charming. I'm going to talk about it and then I'll stop. There's a guy called Hugh Warwick. The conference was in England, the energy conference. And his talk was how hedgehogs are the most important animal in the world. And everyone thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. He gave this wonderful talk about how hedgehogs, with gorgeous pictures of the cute little things, because they got these prickles, they don't run away and they don't defend themselves because they know they're safe. All they have to do is roll into little balls, so the humans can really connect with them and feel. It's harder with the bear, it's harder with other animals, but his point was how you have to connect deeply. Now that we all know. But he took that and talked about how they're disappearing all through England because people are getting rid of their hedgerows, which is what a hedgehog needs. And he took the idea of making little holes in hedges, just doing slight changes in order to help bring the population back. And he went from the love of hedgehogs to little holes in hedges, making sure that we didn't get rid of our hedgerows, to the whole idea of wildlife corridors. So from teeny corridors of hedgehogs to corridors throughout England, wildlife corridors throughout England. It was a beautiful presentation. He's written some wonderful books, and he's, I think, pretty much of a celebrity in England as well, because he speaks so well. So you can look at that if you're interested. And there's a lot more, but now I'll stop.
Thank you, Susan. Lots of interesting things to discuss and to talk about, and we're eager to hear everyone's thoughts on what she just presented. So the conversation is now open for discussion. You are muted to start, but I will give you the opportunity to unmute yourselves when sharing. We do ask that you remain muted unless you are sharing, just to limit our background noise. And when you do unmute yourself, to do so, you can find that in the left corner of the Zoom screen. It's a little green microphone. Please introduce yourself and say where you are joining from. If you are not able to speak via audio or video, you are please feel free to use the chat box located in the toolbar, and I will be watching that and can ask any questions out loud. And then please just be mindful of each other, our time, and our comments, keeping them to a respectful length and on the topic of discussion. So thank you all, and let me give you, all right. Everyone is now able to unmute themselves.
Hi.
Hi.
This is Kathleen Ruth. I'm calling from Dallas, Texas.
Hi.
I'm sorry I joined a little bit late, but I'm fascinated on the topics. And just a quick comment that my brother had a deer get caught in his fence. It was like literally hanging by its leg. We don't know how long. And he tried to nurse it back to health and in his backyard, and would bring it stuff to eat, you know, would go pick weeds and things for it to eat. And he noticed it always picked out the same thing out of the things he gave it. It would only eat this one weed. Huh. And so they looked it up, and I can't remember what it was called, but it was something that helps with infection and healing. So she knew exactly what she needed. Unfortunately, she did not heal, but it was beautiful what he did with that deer, and just the whole story was amazing.
That's one. Isn't it incredible? What are the implications of the type of knowledge that animals carry within them, and we too, since we're animals, once we tune into it? How does that work? That they instinctively know. They may never even have seen it before. How do they know? What does that mean about the nature of intelligence in their life? To me, that's just fascinating.
Yes, I think of us as one organism, not separate organisms, just like what goes on in our body. Without our knowledge, everything knows what to do and where to get the resources. And I think we're all supposed to be tapped into that common organism or knowledge, and we've just lost it by gunking up our pineal glands.
I think that's very nicely said. That we're all tuned into the same fundamental knowledge.
Hi, Susan. This is Joanna.
Hi, Joanna.
Hi. I'm just interested more about the problem of consciousness. When I think about, I assume when you're talking about the problem of consciousness, you're talking about human consciousness, right?
I am.
Yeah, I was just curious if anybody at these conferences talked about consciousness on a different level, like nature divas and working with the elementals, or some of the stuff that Feinhorn does over in Scotland.
Mm-hmm. There's a whole contingent actually of people from Findhorn at the Global Earthfire Conference, and there's quite a few programs. I can give you the names of the people who presented there if you're interested. We can add it to the long list.
I would like that. Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, they were talking, a matter of fact, as a result of that, they're talking about an interesting way of talking about divas that I hadn't heard before, that they are basically energetic forms that help keep the physical forms in good shape.
Mm-hmm.
It's a variation of Goethe's idea of that the blueprints of information out there somewhere, that from those blueprints, this direction of how to put atoms into living form.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very interesting way they were talking about it. They're talking about healing the land. One person was talking there about life being a vortex, life itself being a vortex of energy, which I thought was extremely interesting. We're planning to look at the whole property here and work with it. And one of the things we want to do is to get shamans first. Before we do anything actually specific with the land, we want to get a shaman to come and help us listen to the land. At the conference I went to last year, it was called Our Sacred Earth, and people were talking about how we need to build more densely, which we do, so there's more land for other life. But nowhere was there a question about what the land wanted.
Mm-hmm.
I asked that question and there was just dead silence.
Interesting.
Like, we never even consider it. It's just there, we walk on it, we never even consider it. It's just there for us to use as we please and put things on it. And that disconnect, I think, harms us greatly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were a whole bunch of people who were into fairies, and there's a very interesting program on dowsing and feng shui. Dowsing and kinesiology were connected, which I hadn't heard before. Before I forget, in response to Kathleen, so this Carolyn Ingraham, who's did this excellent presentation on animals basically knowing how to self-medicate. She started a field, which is kind of funny because in a way, like you said, Kathleen, it's not like it's a field. It's like we all would instinctively know it, but us being humans, we also have to have it intellectually. And it's called zoopharmacognosy. Zoo, like Z-O-O, pharma, P-H-A-R-M-A, and cognosy, like knowing. So you can look her up, or you can look up that term if you're interested in the research she's done. That was for Kathleen. I'm just looking for some notes here for you, Joanna, if I can find a couple more that I
I'm
might.
sorry, what was her name again, please?
Caroline Ingraham. Ingraham.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and we will be doing a podcast with her. And
Oh, fascinating.
yeah, and she offered to fly over from England to work with our animals because I was so interested in what can we do since our animals are not able to roam free in the forest. What can we do to enhance their happiness, or when they're ill, what we might use for them. I'm very excited about that.
Hi, Susan. It's Linda.
Hello, Linda.
Hello. This is so fascinating to me. We had a puppy at one time, and you know how they jump up and everything, and she kind of jumped up and slipped back and fell on her tail. I had been growing comfrey in my garden, and it's a really good cedar, so there's a lot of it out there. And she would go out there and eat that. And I wanted to make sure it was okay for her to eat. Me thinking I might be a little smarter than her, no. And so anyway, I contacted the homeopathic vet that we were using. And comfrey evidently is Native American. They used it to knit bones. So she knew exactly what she was doing, and it was fine for her. But every time she went out, she would just eat it. So I think they're just fabulous how they know everything they need to do.
And how good it would be for us, huh?
Yes.
Tune in more.
Yes.
To know what it is we need.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, actually, I would say it's a small way. All of us who are here tonight have a sense of what we need. We need to have conversations like these. They're naturally healing for us.
And thank you for providing this sacred space for us.
It's actually a pleasure.
I don't think I'm familiar. This is Kathleen again in Dallas. With that term you were using, divas or something. What were you referring to there?
Joanna, would you like to answer that?
Sure. This is a new area for me, but nature divas are really elementals. They are energy forces that work, and I've been working with the nature ones, and particularly with the land. And they work through energy. So if you're sensitive to energy, you can go out into your own land and find where maybe a vortex is, or where there's some of them believe in that there are connections that are coming from portals, like we think that Mount Shasta is a huge portal of energy, and that it's full of elementals that come together, which are just little, they're first of all, they're not physical formed. So we're not talking about the Shi or the fairies, but they are in a non-physical form, but they're an entity that is sentient, is my understanding, and that you can connect with them on a cognitive knowing level. If you really open your mind up to working on different vibrational levels. Does that make sense to you, Susan?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that have written about them, and Feinhorn does quite a bit of it, but I've been reading a lot of Michelle Small Wright's work, and one of her recent books, Behaving as if God and All Things Matter. And I think that's, I really learned to start not just talking to my plants, but really going in to think about what are the plants on my land experiencing, and what can I learn from them. And I have a good friend who gardens her whole garden using the connection with a council of nature divas, and her garden is absolutely phenomenal. When she started realizing that you can't, just go out and say, oh, I love you, plant, but that ask it what it really needs. Does it want to be in a different area of your land? Does it want to move around? Does it need different light than what you're providing it? Does it need to be watered less often? Does it want to be by another type of plant? So it's really a matter of knowing on a different level.
It almost makes me want to giggle. I just love that people are having conversations and doing things of this nature. It's so rare that you hear about it in your day-to-day, and I'm sure there are some people in my life that would tell me I was crazy, but I know that I'm not. What was that author's last name? Michelle?
Name is spelled M-A, like Michael, M-A-C-H-E-L-L-E, small, and then Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T.
Great, thank you.
So there are these beautiful new ways, and actually old ways, but growing ways of knowing and understanding that are changing how we're relating. And the more of us that talk about it and do it, the faster it's going to happen. One of the people at the conference, actually was Charles Eisenstein again, he said that we're not only distracted by red herrings like population, when that's not the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue, it is an issue, but the more fundamental issue is consumption. He said also we're looking at the carbon issue as red herring too. We get so caught up in the carbon, and we're trying to find all these solutions about carbon and also climate change. But he says really they're only symptoms, pretty bad symptoms, but they're only symptoms of planetary dysfunction based on choices we have made. And that instead of focusing on carbon or even climate change itself, what made climate change possible? And ultimately said the real question, and then one that would solve everything, is how do you want to live on Earth? We can use technology to try fix this, that, and the other, but how do you want to live on our Earth? And that question is part of the awakening of human consciousness, and a fundamental question. Do we want to fix things with the technology that we screwed up, or do you want to learn how to live in harmony, say we don't have to fix anything? And how do we each answer that question? And how do we each do the best we can? And I forgot to say earlier, someone who says people say it's too late to stop it, et cetera, et cetera. He said it's always too late, but it's never too late. It was too late to stop the passenger pigeon from disappearing, but it's not too late to make profound changes. And so it's quite irrelevant if it's late or not. The only issue is, what do we do now? And there are these many different answers. And for me, understanding the sacred nature of life is a fundamental answer. Because if we understand the sacred nature of life, everything else changes.
I think Einstein said something similar to that, didn't he? He said something like, look closely at nature and you'll understand everything. I can't remember how beautifully he put it, but...
Yeah. The difference is we're beginning to realize it a little more. It's entering into our consciousness a little more.
Well, I think that's just downright root cause analysis, right? Mm-hmm. And it's fascinating to me that that's happening in the business world too. And it's like, why is this just now a thing?
We don't understand the timings, at least I don't.
Val Murray from Victoria, BC, Canada. And I'm part of a group called Earth Literacies, and we talk a lot about consciousness and what we can do. Every member of the group is involved in something, from raging grannies to I hold council sessions and really work with the idea of reciprocal relationship, because I think that's missing, is so often we think that we're going to save the earth, we're going to save the grizzly bears and all the rest by acting politically, stop pipelines and so on. But the notion of reciprocity seems to be missing. And I really wonder what you think about this. When I listened to you at the beginning, you have such a cogent way of pulling all the threads together. And when I listen to you, I think, yes, indeed, consciousness is pushing at the old story, the old paradigm, the old worldview that says we are separate from everything, and continuing to be colonial in our attitudes towards animals in the same way that we've been colonial towards so many indigenous people. And I think it's changing. I feel like it's being pushed and pushed and pushed, and there is a great resistance. In quantum physics, we're seeing that, yes, indeed, everything has a consciousness relative to its nature. That's true of slime mold, it's true of great apes, it's true of us. But these can be silos. They can be separate streams of information. And I'm starting to wonder if there aren't people like yourself who are simply midwives that can connect, they can thread the pieces. Could you comment, please?
I think that's true. Everything you said, I must say, was very cogent. I never thought of myself as a midwife, but in a sense, yes, it feels like information is flowing through me, and I have to have it flow through me and out to where it will bloom and grow. In that sense, yes, I do feel that way for myself. I'm a very small little midwife, given the enormity of the problems, and that there are other people better at it than I. What I don't feel yet, and what I'm beginning to feel from all of these different threads, is that there are all these threads, and we haven't quite yet come to a place where there's they've begun to be knit together into a coherent web of what we should do and how we should do it. That we're awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And it's our job, those of us who are alive now, to begin to try and do that. So in that sense, I would say every one of us is a midwife.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of us has something to do with how to pull it together. We don't have a world leader yet who can say, okay, this is how we should live. We don't have any one voice that there are lots of wonderful voices. None of them in my mind have a full answer yet, and I'm not sure we're there yet as a species, but we're moving towards it. And I think each of us, it's a joy and a responsibility for each of us to do everything we can, and not necessarily in hardcore action, because that can become congealed, but to really reach within us our own inner wisdom, which is connected to a larger wisdom, and express it through us in our own way. So I guess my answer would be, we're all midwives at different levels.
Hmm. That's good to hear. Thank you.
I'd like to comment again if I could. This is Kathleen. Absolutely fascinated by that, and I think what we're saying is this is an energetic change, right? I mean, we know that, and we also know, and you sort of alluded to this, both of you guys, that you know, there's going to be an opposite reaction to any action that we take. So, you know, thinking of it as, you know, I have friends who are so passionate and they want to go out and they want to, they want to yell it from the rooftops. And unfortunately, there's a lot of anger in that, and it polarizes us. I'm afraid that it might add to the polarization, and I would like to see some more communication around helping people understand the science behind frequency. So when you approach a problem from a positive perspective, how much more effective that really is.
Yes. Other people like to comment on that?
It's part of our oneness too, right? Understanding rather than judging, and helping each other come to new conclusions about our lives and our mistakes instead of fighting about what we should be doing. Just looking at sort of the root cause of our disconnectedness and helping us understand each other and be more patient and understanding so we can work together and never do harm.
Charles Eisenstein made a comment about he thinks when we stop fighting each other, consciousness can shift very quickly, which is an encouraging thing. I don't know about the science of frequency per se. If I speak with John Reed, I might take your question and send it to him. Or if you want to email him yourself, you can. Completely brilliant, self-taught researcher who's really interested in this.
What is that name, please, Susan? John Reed?
John Reed, R-E-I-D. And he's the one who did the cymoscope. And you can see that the beauty of patterns of beautiful music and harmony. And then if you take the noise of a truck or something like that, you can see the jagged energy made visible. And that's related, I think, to your question of the frequency of being gentle and positive versus anger. Anger generates anger. Anger generates discord, discoordination. It's not productive. It has its place, but generally, you're right. All it does is antagonize, and from a biological point of view, it goes back into our emotional brain, the limbic system, just activates all that stuff, and we lose our capacity for spirituality and compassion and patience. The best thing I have seen so far is a whole Buddhist idea of compassion for all other people, and trying to understand where they're coming from, as you said. And yes, that's the approach that works.
Susan?
Yeah. Go ahead, Joanna.
Did John?
Yes.
Yeah. Did John Reed, when he talks about the patterns of frequency, did he relate, or has he thought about or shared how that might connect with sacred geometry forms?
Absolutely. He's totally into sacred geometry. He's into ley lines. He's into all that stuff.
That's cool. I'm going to have to look his work up. Thank you.
I'm very interested in that as well, and I think Kathleen has hit on a really important point, because I know from having done years of advocacy to end the killing of grizzly bears for trophy here in BC, that there were many in the work with me who were as angry as the people they opposed. And there was a lot of just digging into position, because we were only talking about the issue. We weren't getting to know one another. So there wasn't even any forgiveness, really. And there was a lot of dissonance within each group. Even, obviously there's dissonance between ourselves and trophy hunters, but there was dissonance within the advocacy groups, right, who wanted to do things differently, or some just wanted to fight. and win the war, but it's never won that way. We're looking now at possibly the trophy hunt coming back in some parts of BC, and it's all hinging on a government change. So you really don't win anything that way. And yet I struggle with this all the time, because it seems as though the political powers that be will be swayed by the loud voices. And yet I look at Jane Goodall, who is such a, she's just such a beacon to me, and she wins everyone over with love. So and yourself, there's nothing abrasive about you. And I struggle with this, I really do.
My first reaction, just before I forget it, is you said get to know each other, which is, I think, completely valid.
Mm-hmm.
To get to know each other as beings. I would add, also get to know the bears.
Oh, I have done that. Oh, I tell you, anybody who doesn't know the bears is missing out.
But I meant that as part of the process, not just for you, but for the people who are against them, to get to know the bears.
Mm-hmm.
They're not looking at them as anything other than things.
Mm-hmm.
They're not actually, we need to know each other, and we need to know the bears.
You know, for myself personally, this is what I've come to. When I convene council, I just did one yesterday, and I lined the whole perimeter of the room with these incredible images of grizzly bears. So they were invited into the council.
Mm.
And the stories of these bears, it lends something to the council that having just people coming together would not accomplish.
Yes.
I think you're absolutely right. I wish I could invite wolves and raccoons and cedar trees. I wish I could invite them all into the council to be seen like that. And the reciprocity would be clear.
I guess I was, and reciprocity is a beautiful word. I was suggesting that trying to get the people who wanted to kill the bears to get to see the bears. That would be a shift.
Unfortunately, yes, it is a shift, and it's very expensive. You know, when I go to the bear viewing sites, they're in wilderness areas, and I choose to invest in those experiences. Many people don't. Most Canadians and British Columbians do not go to those places.
I think I was speaking more symbolically than physically. But we're nearing the end of the hour.
Thank you.
I think what you're talking about is incredibly important, Val, and I would like to continue it.
Mm-hmm.
We can bring it up again next time too, because I have some thoughts about it. But I'd like to see if other people have other comments or questions before we end it.
Certainly.
Chelsea, are you there?
I see.
Yes, I'm here. I was just going to jump in with inviting anyone, who maybe hasn't had the chance to speak, or if you have something you'd like to share before we close.
Hi, this is Beth in San Jose, California. That word reciprocity is really grabs me. I was reading an article about the intelligence in all kinds of life, and in fact, I sent the podcast to Susan probably a month ago. But they're talking about words. Susan, you had mentioned climate change and sustainability and how do we fix things. But I think we need to primarily heal ourselves. Some of those reactions in people that are so angry comes from a unhealed place in them, I think, for all kinds of reasons. But besides that, it's to shift the reciprocity mindset, is that the earth sustains us, but yet we also sustain the earth, and we have a responsibility and a gift to share. And I think realizing that all beings have gifts and each one is important.
Yeah.
If one is missing, we all suffer. And I think somehow, as part of the conversation, to help people understand their own responsibility and value in that web. So I really like that word. So it's very useful to me to think about that in terms, it's not an us against them, it's a reciprocity in all ways. So I wanted to share that thought.
Thank you, and yes.
You're welcome.
Well, we are coming to the hour then. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight and choosing to spend your time with us. And thank you for sharing your thoughts on these subjects. It reminds me of the quote where, I don't know who said it, but it's, maybe the earth does not want to be saved. Maybe the earth wants to be loved, and that will save it. And I feel a lot of love here tonight, and I think that's what's going to be the driving force to start making these changes and these paradigm shifts. So thank you everyone again for being here. We will not have a conservation conversation in June, as Susan is traveling, myself included, and we're just going to take a month off, and then we will come back in July. The best way to keep updated is with our newsletter. So if you have not done that, please sign up for it. And then these conversations are recorded and posted to our website where you can share them, re-listen to them, and I will be sending an email out with some resources that we talked about tonight. So Susan, do you have anything to add?
No, well, yes, I think people's comments were thoughtful and wonderful and important, every one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And Val, your struggle is the struggle we all have. It's a profound one, and it's really important. How do we work to make the change? I just wanted to honor that. But thank you all for a terrific conversation.
Conservation Conversations are a production of the Earthfire Institute, a wildlife sanctuary and rehabilitation center whose mission is to change how people see and therefore treat wildlife and nature. Join us as we work toward becoming a committed and supportive community of all beings. Earthfire depends on your donations to continue these conversations. You can donate at our website, www.earthfireinstitute.org. The soundscapes are by Wild Sanctuary Presents, Bernie Krause and Philip Arberg. Thank you for listening. Please join us for these monthly conversations.